History of God's people, few figures stand out as prominently as Moses, the great deliverer. His epic journey from a helpless baby hidden in a river basket to the fearless leader who parted the Red Sea and brought a nation out of 400 years of slavery not only transformed his own life, but also altered the course of an entire people and pointed forward to the ultimate redemption. In this narrative we will delve into the depths of his origins, formation, and the events that shaped the man who would become the greatest prophet Israel ever knew before the coming of the Messiah. Our story begins with a baby boy named Moses. He was born in a slave hut in the land of Egypt during a time when Pharaoh had ordered every newborn Hebrew boy to be thrown into the Nile. Egypt was a powerful empire at that time, with people from many nations and cultures living under the shadow of the pyramids. It was a place where Egyptian gods and Hebrew faith clashed daily. Exodus 2 tells us about Moses' birth. It says the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. This shows us that although Moses was born into slavery, he entered the world under a death sentence, yet protected by a mother's courage. Moses' family was very important to him. They were faithful Hebrews, meaning they clung to the promise God had given Abraham. In Exodus 1 we read that a man from the house of Levi went and took as wife a daughter of Levi. This means that his family followed the covenant traditions even in the darkest days. When Moses was a child, he was placed in a basket coated with tar and pitch and set among the reeds of the Nile. The palace of Pharaoh was nearby, so Moses received an unexpected royal education. He learned to read and write in Egyptian hieroglyphs, which was the language of power in that region. He also learned about Egyptian gods and military strategy, but the most important thing for his family was that his sister watched over him and his mother was later hired to nurse him. As Moses grew, his family could no longer hide the truth of his Hebrew blood, so he lived between two worlds, minus the luxury of the palace and the suffering of his own people. Exodus 2:11 tells us one day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. This shows us that although Moses was raised as an Egyptian prince, his heart was always drawn back to the cries of the slaves. Moses took this identity very seriously. He wanted to help his people. As he saw more and more injustice, he began to identify with the role of a deliverer, the very thing the elders had whispered about in the slave quarters. The Egyptians knew him only as the adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter. They never imagined the destiny that awaited him. It was during this time that Moses began to act on his own. Today we know this as the moment his life would change forever. But to Moses at the time it was simply an act of justice. He believed he had to stop the oppression. Moses decided he had to do something to defend his people. He began intervening, believing he was doing the right thing to protect his brothers. The first mention of Moses' encounter with his people in the Bible is when he killed an Egyptian taskmaster who was beating a Hebrew slave. Exodus 2:12 tells us he looked this way and that, and seeing no one he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. This means that Moses was there acting alone. He did not announce his mission, but he struck the first blow. After that, Moses became even more determined to act. He tried to settle a fight between the Hebrews, but they rejected him. Exodus 2:14 continues by saying, "Who made you ruler and judge over us?" This shows that Moses believed he was called, yet his own people were not ready. Moses wasn't satisfied with just acting in Egypt. He fled to the land of Midian, where he became a shepherd. Years later, when Moses had already become the man who spoke with God, he looked back and reflected on that period of his life. In Acts 7:25, Stephen later recalled that Moses thought his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them. These words show that Moses deeply regretted acting ahead of God's timing. He recognized that he had made serious mistakes by taking matters into his own hands and felt unworthy because of it. Thus ends the first part of Moses' story. He began as a condemned baby born in slavery, raised in Pharaoh's palace, and driven into exile as a fugitive. But his passion led him to try to deliver his people, believing he was acting alone. Moses was about to settle into 40 years of obscurity in Midian tending sheep. He had no idea that his life was about to change completely. At the burning bush, something extraordinary would happen, something that would transform Moses the fugitive into Moses the deliverer. This first part of Moses' life shows us how even the best intentions can lead us down the wrong path when we run ahead of God's timing. It also prepares us to understand the incredible transformation Moses would undergo from a broken shepherd to the prophet who confronted Pharaoh and led an entire nation to freedom. The story of Moses' call is one of the most dramatic and significant events in the Old Testament. It all began on an ordinary day in the wilderness of Midian. Moses, the exiled shepherd, was on his way to lead his flock to better pasture with a simple purpose: to survive another day. Exodus 3:2 forgives us a vivid description of what happened. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So he thought, "I will go over and see this strange sight." This encounter was so intense that it left Moses completely humbled. His flock stood nearby but saw nothing unusual. They took no notice while Moses removed his sandals. For 40 years he had wandered in this state of quiet exile. While Moses was in this state of ordinary routine, God was preparing him for the impossible task ahead. In Midian there was a priest named Jethro. The Lord had already spoken to Jethro's daughter about Moses. But now the Lord appeared to Moses in the burning bush and gave him specific instructions to go back to Egypt. Moses naturally was terrified. After all, his reputation as a wanted man was well known. But the Lord reassured Moses with words that give us insight into God's plan for him. In Exodus 3:10 we read, "So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people the Israelites out of Egypt." Obedient to the vision, Moses went. Then something like doubt fell from Moses' heart and he could see his calling clearly. He got up and returned to Egypt. Moses' transformation was immediate and profound. The man who arrived at the burning bush stammering with excuses now stood before Pharaoh demanding, "Let my people go." At once he began to confront the powers of Egypt with signs and wonders. All those who heard him were astonished and asked, "Isn't this the man who fled from Egypt?" Yet Moses grew more and more confident and baffled by proving that the God of the Hebrews was greater than all Egyptian gods. Imagine the shock of the people in Goshen. The man they expected to remain hidden in Midian was now standing in the palace declaring freedom. The confusion and astonishment must have been immense. But Moses was undeterred. He used all his knowledge of the palace, all his years in the wilderness, now redirected to proclaim the name of the Lord. However, Moses' time in Egypt was not without challenge. In Exodus 5:22, he cried out to the Lord, "Why have you brought trouble to this people?" This journey back to the palace is an intriguing detail. Moses does not tell us exactly how long the struggle lasted, but we know that time of waiting allowed him to reflect deeply on God's power. It may have been a time of intimate communion with the Lord, of re-examining the promises in light of Pharaoh's hardened heart. When Moses returned to the negotiation table, he was even more strengthened in his faith. Moses' return to the Hebrews, however, was not without conflict. His demands stirred up significant opposition. Exodus 6:9 tells us Moses reported this to the Israelites, but they did not listen to him because of their discouragement. But his brother Aaron stood with him and the mission continued. This dramatic escalation marked the end of the first phase of Moses' leadership. From the palace, he decided to lead the people toward the wilderness. We can imagine the fear Moses must have felt as he faced the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army behind them. The last time he had been in Egypt, he was a fugitive. Now he was returning as the chosen deliverer. Exodus 14:21 describes the initial miracle. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The people crossed on dry ground. Once delivered, Moses wasted no time. He led them to Mount Sinai, where God gave the law. The situation in the wilderness became so dangerous that the people complained and even made a golden calf. When Moses learned of this, he confronted them yet interceded for them. Thus Moses guided them through 40 years of wandering. The time Moses spent in the desert is one of the most formative periods of his life. The scriptures do not provide every daily detail, but we can assume it was not a period of idleness. Knowing Moses' obedience, it is likely that he continued to teach and judge, though the journey tested every limit. This time in the wilderness was likely a crucial period of preparation for the nation. Away from the comforts of Egypt, they had the opportunity to learn dependence on God, reflect on his faithfulness, and prepare for the promised land. We don't know exactly how long every lesson lasted, but it seems to have been a period of daily miracles and daily testing. The next major event in Moses' life occurs when the people reached the border of Canaan and the spies were sent in. This marks the beginning of a new phase in his leadership, leading to the final instructions and the transfer of authority to Joshua. Moses' final journey toward the promised land marked a turning point in the story of Israel's redemption. Through these years, the covenant was established and a new generation was raised. The events leading to the end began at Mount Nebo. Deuteronomy 30:1 tells us, "Then Moses climbed Mount Nebo from the plains of Moab to the top of Pisgah across from Jericho. The Lord showed him the whole land." This divine calling marked the official end of Moses' earthly leadership. Moses first reminded the people of the law, then blessed each tribe. In the plains of Moab, they had a significant moment of farewell. Deuteronomy 31:7 records the outcome of this moment. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the presence of all Israel, "Be strong and courageous." From there, the transition happened quickly. Moses was not allowed to enter the land because of one moment of disobedience, yet he saw it from afar. This pattern of faithfulness followed by discipline would teach the people the holiness of God. In Moab, Moses again faced opposition from within, but he also performed the ultimate act of obedience by climbing the mountain alone. Deuteronomy 30:5 tells us, "And Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in Moab." This incident highlights the humility Moses embraced. After his death, the people mourned and Joshua took the lead, encouraging the new generation and preparing them to cross the Jordan. Deuteronomy 30:9 tells us, "Now Joshua son of Nun was filled with the spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid his hands on him." The people listened to him. However, the memory of Moses' warnings about future disobedience soon arose. In the land of Canaan, the new generation received a more favorable beginning. They examined the law daily to see if they were living by it. From the wilderness, the covenant message went forward into the generations. On his way to the mountain, Moses stopped and gave the final blessings. His words, recorded in Deuteronomy 33, are a powerful pastoral charge. He concluded by saying, "Blessed are you, O Israel. Who is like you, a people saved by the Lord?" Moses' journey from the Nile to Nebo transformed a band of slaves into a holy nation. Through his leadership, Israel established a covenant relationship with God, creating a people that would continue to carry the promise long after his departure. These events also provided the foundation for the Torah. His experiences, the challenges he faced in the people he led, all shaped the law and the prophets. Moses' determination in the face of Pharaoh, his ability to lead through the desert, and his unshakable passion for God's glory serve as a powerful testimony. His journey not only formed the nation of Israel, but also deepened the understanding of covenant love across every generation. As Moses stood on Mount Nebo, he was about to open a new chapter for the people he loved. His death and the rise of Joshua would launch Israel into its conquest of the land. Moses' time of leadership marked the beginning of a new era characterized by law, grace, and promise. A few days after his death, the people found themselves at the edge of the Jordan. Joshua 1:1 describes the start of the new chapter. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, "Son of Nun, Moses, aid now then you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I am about to give to them." The whole nation was stirred and the promise began to unfold. While they were preparing, the priests carried the ark and the waters parted once more. The religious leaders of Canaan grew fearful, but the Israelites crossed on dry ground. The commander of the Lord's army appeared to Joshua, assuming they were ready for battle. The next day the people were brought before the reality of the land. Sensing the need for courage, Joshua boldly declared the Lord's presence. This strategy caused such confidence that the walls of Jericho later fell. That night the people received an encouraging sign of victory. The following years a pattern of conquest and settlement unfolded, but the Church of Israel prayed and remained faithful. Moses faced a series of trials before his death, minus opposition from Pharaoh, complaints from the people, and his own moment of failure, minus, yet he skillfully defended the truth by his obedience and by his intercession. Although the enemy hoped to destroy the movement, the covenant proved stronger. When the time came for his departure, Moses had the opportunity to give the final charge. His words, recorded in Deuteronomy, are a powerful presentation of the covenant. After this final blessing, Moses was taken by the Lord before their very eyes. The journey of the people was marked by remembrance and obedience. Despite the warnings of future exile, the Israelites were determined to follow. Moses' leadership transformed the story of redemption from a cry in Egypt to a nation standing on the edge of promise. Through his life, the good news of the coming Messiah was foreshadowed. These events provided the context for the entire Old Testament. His experiences, the people he encountered, and the power of God all shaped Israel's identity and faith. Moses' attitude is well summarized in his own words. In Deuteronomy 6:5, Hero Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. The narrative in the Torah ends with the death of Moses, but we know from the rest of Scripture that the people eventually entered the land and the promise continued for centuries to come. Even in the most difficult circumstances, the memory of Moses remained alive, leaving a legacy that would influence the world. Moses' time in the wilderness, far from being a time of inactivity, was marked by constant communion with God and patient leadership. During those years, he not only wrote the law but also modeled the life every leader is called to live. The book of Numbers, though written later, captures this truth in Numbers 12:3. Now Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. After his death, it is believed that the influence of his teaching continued, although the Scriptures do not provide every detail of those years. There are indications in the book of Joshua and later prophets that the law reached every tribe and beyond. In Joshua 1:8 we read, "Keep this book of the law always on your lips." Although we do not have every biblical confirmation, early Jewish tradition affirms that the Torah shaped the nation. The books of the Old Testament represent the continuing instruction for God's people. These writings provide vital guidance for holy living and address practical matters of worship and justice. In the book of Joshua, we see the purpose of these instructions lived out as the nation grew in strength and possession of the land. The final reflection in Deuteronomy is particularly moving as Moses promises God's faithfulness. In Deuteronomy 31:6, he says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." Early Jewish tradition states that the message of Moses continued to guide Israel despite exile and return. Although the specific details of every chapter are not recorded, it is believed that the people remained faithful in remembering Moses' impact on God's plan is immeasurable. His teachings on covenant law and the coming prophet formed the foundation for much of biblical doctrine. Concepts like redemption, the Passover, and the law were all developed and lived out through Moses. In Deuteronomy 18:15 he articulates the promise of the future prophet: "The Lord, your God, will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you." Moses' view of the people as a holy nation profoundly shaped the understanding of community. His role in bringing the Israelites out of Egypt was crucial. His leadership opened the door of God's deliverance to an entire people. In Exodus 19:5-6 he said, "Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession." This radical statement of covenant grace had profound implications for Israel's identity. Moses' influence in the centuries that followed is difficult to overestimate. His writings were fundamental to the development of Jewish and Christian thought. Key figures like the prophets, the apostles, and later reformers were deeply influenced by the words and life of Moses. Moreover, Moses' example significantly contributed to the development of biblical leadership. His humility in Numbers 12:3 continues to shape leaders today. Moses' life and ministry offer a powerful testimony to the faithfulness of God. From being a baby in a basket to becoming the servant who saw the promised land from afar, Moses' story continues to inspire and challenge believers. His unwavering obedience, willingness to confront power, and deep love for God's people have left a legacy that continues to shape faith to millennia after the coming of the one he foreshadowed. In his final blessing before death, Moses expressed confidence not only in his own departure but in the future of the people he had led. In Deuteronomy 33:29 he said, "Blessed are you, Israel, who is like you, a people saved by the Lord." Moses' confidence in the enduring power of God's promise proved prophetic. His leadership, his law, and his example continue to impact lives and shape faith today, a lasting testimony to the transformative power of the God he served so faithfully. Moses' journey from the Nile basket to Mount Nebo is one of the most inspiring and transformative stories in the history of faith. His life shows us the power of God's call to overcome fear, the power of obedience to conquer empires, and the power of covenant to change generations. As we reflect on the life of this extraordinary servant, we are challenged to consider our own journey of faith. Like the Israelites, we are called to trust courageously, to obey boldly, and to walk into the promises we have found in the Lord. If this story has touched your heart and you want to learn more about the life-changing promises of Scripture, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We have much more amazing content planned for you. And if you found this video inspiring and uplifting, why not share it with friends and family? You never know who might need to hear this message of hope and deliverance today. Remember Moses' words in Deuteronomy 6:5, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength." May we, like Moses, press on toward the goal of serving the Lord and leaving a lasting legacy. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share. See you in the next video.